And this morning, a top Hamas official spoke to CBS.
All right, we're gonna talk about, dude, that's crazy. That's a crazy thing that I never thought I would ever hear. A top Hamas official talk to CBS. That's crazy. That's a crazy thing to hear, man. And wild. Another sign of the changing times. Yeah, CBS are all terrorist sympathizers. Yeah, I'm sure they'll come after CBS sometime soon. They'll be like, wow,
CBS is Hamas.
Yeah. CBS is also, CBS is Hamas. It's true. It's correct. Cancel CBS.
CBS News about talks to extend the ceasefire in Gaza after President Trump's chief envoy.
Will Morgar, thank you for the 10 gift subs. Hype train, level 3, baby.
Explain what the president meant by his so-called last warning to Hamas. Deborah Patta has more on Steve Witkoff's comments to reporters at the White House.
I think there's going to be some action.
With 100 big ones.
It could be jointly with the Israelis. It's unclear right now, but I think Hamas has an opportunity to act reasonably, to do what's right, and then to walk out.
But senior Hamas official Mushir al-Masri says they have no intention of leaving, and while they don't want to rule Gaza after the war, they will not disarm, he said, until there is a Palestinian state.
Yeah, that's insanely valid. The most valid statement of all time. Like, what are we doing here? What kind of... It's valid for Ukraine to say the same exact thing, just as it is valid for Palestinians to say the same exact thing.
Hamas is a legitimate resistance movement, he said, and we won't abandon our weapons. The US has designated Hamas a terrorist organization. Al-Masri says the only way to free the remaining hostages is through negotiations to end the war. The uncertainty has left many hostage families raging against their Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, whom they blame for failed peace talks. Nama Weinberg, whose cousin was killed in captivity, had this message for President Trump.
Don't cooperate with Netanyahu. Don't be the one that would be responsible for the death.
That's crazy that they're showing this on American news. This is like, for the past 16 months, if I were to ever bring this up, it had to be from like Haaretz. Like,
it is. A huge chunk of it now just seems that it's like Hamas is talking to them. We're allowed to take seriously the idea that there's like pressures on this conflict that exist outside of like whatever fucking like Netanyahu and the White House agree is allowed to be discussed. And like, by the way, it's not because like, again, like Trump and Netanyahu have suddenly created this space on their own initiative for like this sort of thing to exist. It's like the combination of, the fact that like, just how events have played out, like where they're at the state of the conflict, where they're at with like the state of the conflict in Gaza.
They're also talking about how Israel is up the bag a little bit.
Yes.
So that's like, there's also that too.
There's like a nature,
I'm not waiting for the New York Times to write that. Once the New York Times starts writing about it like that though, it's over. You know what I mean? Israel is done. They might as well shutter the operation. Okay. Like this is the last bastion of unfettered, unrestricted Hasbara. So we'll see. RIP Adblock. I know, dude. Look at Bob's Furniture.
Those that are still alive there.
In Gaza, despair has replaced the relief over the initial ceasefire. Israel has blocked all aid to the more than 2 million Palestinians there. Most cannot survive without it. Rihan Sharab is trying to find joy amidst the misery, turning discarded aid cartons into Ramadan lanterns. We're not asking for anything more, she said, than the life we used to live before this war. President Trump not only threatened Hamas, but the entire population of Gaza this week, warning them to release the hostages or face death. His envoy, Steve Witkoff, says he will visit the region in the coming days. Nate?
Interesting.
There's now it's looking
this
like...
wasn't aired in the U.S.? Yes, it was.
Apparently one of Netanyahu's coalition partners, one of the Orthodox parties, is going to leave. Like, there may be, like, some measure of... Like, we'll see. I'm curious...
Wait, over drafting them? Is that what the...
I didn't see what the final straw cited was, but I imagine, considering that's been the biggest grievance, I wouldn't be surprised.
Oof. How could CBS Mornings not be aired in the U.S.? Yeah, no, this is 100% a U.S. aired.
This morning's
This was aired in the United States.
Yeah,
You're wrong.
See, Columbia Broadcasting Service. Actually, they're only airing in Peru today.
Yeah.
It's Peru Day at CBS.
But yeah, scoop. Israel objected to secret U.S. Hamas talks and tense call between Netanyahu's right-hand man and Trump's envoy, Barak Ravid, Israel's very own.
That is like the one thing you're really not allowed to tell Trump, that you can't talk to somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, actually,
but
fuck
Trump
that.
is never,
also, who the fuck is Bibi to say that about anybody in the U.S.? Like,
also, Trump is never really liked Benjamin Netanyahu anyway. It's not like, I don't think that they have any love between them. He just loves the money that he gets from Miriam Adelson. Like, he doesn't give a shit.
No, and also, like, Netanyahu is... there's a really good documentary that I watched. I think it was called like King Bibi or something. It's an Israeli documentary, but it's just like it tells the story of Bibi, like his own background, whatever. But it ends.
Nobody
with,
likes
like,
this piece of shit.
No, but
nobody.
It ends with Trump and Melania coming to Bibi's house for dinner, and they're all like, and it is such a one-way like glazing.
Yeah,
it is like a fucking Krispy Kreme factory in there. It was insane, and the impression that you get of it is that like they're both men who like on the whole are extremely conscious of like who wears the pants in the relationship. The problem though is that like eventually, as is evidently now happening, that like Trump was going to run into eventually wanting to do something for himself and for his administration that would conflict with Netanyahu. And whereas Biden was like, oh, we'll give you anything, we'll roll over, like, whatever. Like, that's just not Trump's approach. Like setting, it's a crazy fucking world we live in, but it's the truth. It's undeniable.
Yeah. Like maybe Trump's pettiness might work in favor of Palestinians, but it doesn't seem to be the case, because every time Benjamin Netanyahu undermines Donald Trump, he just throws a flashbang in the middle of the conversation by being like, I'm going to kill all the Palestinians dead. I'm going to kill them super hard, harder than anyone's ever killed them before. Like every time Benjamin Netanyahu f***s him over, instead of doing the Biden thing, which is to be like, oh, I'm going to give him a stern talking to, he just does the reverse Brandon, I guess, which is I'm going to be more brutal than anyone's ever seen before. Because that's what he did. That's what he did when this initially leaked. That's when Donald Trump came out with that Truth Social post where he was like, I'm going to pummel Gaza into the fucking ground type shit. Like every time there's any information that like undermines Trump, he goes in the opposite direction.
So, all right, I'll read it. When Trump aides sounded out Israeli officials in early February about the possibility of engaging directly with Hamas, the Israelis advised them not to do it, particularly not without preconditions. Israel found out through other channels that the U.S. was moving ahead anyway. Netanyahu has avoided publicly criticizing Trump since Axios revealed the unprecedented U.S.-Hamas talks on Wednesday, saying only that Israel had made its opinion clear to the U.S. But Netanyahu's closest confidant, Ron Dermer, who began his career as like a Republican political operative, he's been the Israeli ambassador to the U.S. He's like the go-between essentially for the U.S. and Netanyahu. Dermer was much less restrained a day earlier in a call with U.S. hostage envoy Adam Boehler, the sources said. The call happened several hours after Boehler met in Doha with Khalil al-Hayya, one of Hamas's most senior political officials and the head of its negotiating team. So, I mean,
Boehler's negotiations in Qatari capital began the week prior with a meeting with lower-level Hamas officials. The talks were centered on bringing home American hostage Adon Alexander, 21, and the bodies of 4 deceased.
This is also like part of what's got to be grinding Netanyahu's gears is that like Trump is actually doing something to bring a hostage back. Yeah. And it's like, that could create I mean, it's, I don't know how much Netanyahu is really scared about. And I truly don't know. Like I don't know what the people around him's like biggest fears are domestically, like what they feel like could threaten their power. But it would strike me that like the American president outflanking you on bringing the Israelis home does seem like something that could have political consequences in the right context.
The U.S. message to Hamas was releasing the U.S. hostage would go a long way with Trump, who would then press for a broader deal that could involve a long-term truce, safe passage out of Gaza for Hamas leaders, the release of all remaining hostages, and the end of the war. This part is really funny to me because that right there is, again, like Western thinking, where they still have not learned the lessons at all, where they're like, no, these guys want to escape. They want to escape.
They have like a...
Telling a Palestinian...
Oh, yeah, like it's like Sinwar was a look at him, he's such a schmuck for getting like caught.
Yeah, or when they were lying over and over again about like Yahya Sinwar being like He's probably in Doha by now.
Oh yeah,
or
no, he's on the beach.
He escaped through the tunnels.
He's having he's sipping caipirinhas.
Like the one thing that Palestinians won't do is f***ing leave. Okay, that's the thing that they just cannot comprehend. It's so I get why an Israeli person, like an Israeli politician, would think that. I get why an American politician would think that, because they're like, why the f*** would I get into trouble? Why would I put myself in the line of fire? These guys don't want to leave. Okay, that's why Yahya Sinwar died fighting, rather than chained to multiple hostages, as the Israeli media previously had claimed, as though Israel shows restraint in terms of killing their own hostages.
I gotta say though, it is again, not to just constantly seem like I'm praising Trump and relative to Biden on this stuff, but it is just crazy how the eye of the Trump administration is we need to bottle this shit back up. And, even though we love Israel and we love, we love Zionism, we love the settler project or whatever, but the idea of this war as a thing that they've got to, put the cork on is such a different approach to how the first year plus of this conflict was being managed from the US. And that's because that's how it was happening. They were managing it. They weren't even, there was not even, I mean, it feels so psycho just how many arguments we had with people over, the extent to which can Biden really apply pressure or whatever. And it's yeah, I mean, take a look at what goddamn Donald Trump is doing.
Yeah. I do think that Trump's petty narcissistic nature might actually cause a little bit of a dent in the seemingly impossible to shake allegiance that we have to Israel. Because it's previous reports have shown that Trump is not exactly super fond of Netanyahu. There was a point where when Netanyahu, I think, celebrated the Biden victory, that he even called him a asshole or something.
But this is where it's
his interest in gaining momentum domestically by being see, I brought out an American captive. I'm the peacemaker.
And also I think it's from the perspective of just when you don't have an outcome of we need to give Palestinians freedom, which is not Donald Trump's perspective here, but the idea is instead, what are the deliverables here? What are the things that I can actually get out of this?
Yeah.
What can I demonstrate as a political victory on the broad category of Israel-Palestine shit? That both sides, Republican and Democrat, would prospectively and to me, that's more or less what's that seems, at least on this specific narrow part of it, because obviously it doesn't seem like Trump is doing anything to restrain Israel when it comes to the Syria shit. There's all sorts of ways in which Israel is very clearly not being restrained.
Yeah, there's this moment from 2021. Trump the first person that congratulated Biden was Bibi Netanyahu, the man I did more for than any other person I dealt with. Bibi could have stayed quiet. He has made a terrible mistake, Trump said, according to Axios, as Trump referred to Netanyahu by his nickname.
Netanyahu was very early, earlier than most. I haven't spoken to him since.
Yeah, I mean they're tight now. They're
tight now, but also it does show that one will abandon the other if it's necessary.
Yeah, Trump's criticism of Israel's Netanyahu draws strong condemnation from GOP rivals. There's that moment too, where Trump at a rally said Netanyahu let us down just before the U.S. killed top Iranian general Qasem Soleimani.
This was before people were positioning themselves at that time to the first quote right there criticizing him as DeSantis. And it's there was still that time when people were trying to position themselves and be well, how do you do Trumpism without Trump? And that was before that became obviously a non-starter. And what was it? What did he call? What was the nickname for Ron? Pudding Ron?
Oh yeah, Pudding Cup Ron or something. I don't know. He said meat. Did he say meatball? That was a banger, but then he didn't do that.
Yeah, bro. Meatball Ron. Meatball.
Look, I need you to understand the depravity and the dehumanization that my biggest haters, who are Sex Pestiny fans, long-term Sex Pestiny fans, put themselves through. This motherfucker has been following since 2019. I just unbanned him, chatters. Actually, _OB says, hey man, when are you and Steven doing another IRL stream?
When that guy sent that first message, somebody who was 14 is now halfway through college. Somebody who was in 8th grade is now halfway through college.
Yeah. And he has not stopped hate watching consistently since then. since I was like, yeah, dude, this dude is defending saying the N-word to like his black podcast co-host. Like, this is insane. And he has locked in, just hasn't stopped. Look at this. Most of us are here to laugh at you, homie. You're like one of the cringiest commentators on this platform. You're so woke, man. Wow, man, you're a dog shit human.
Wait, he was saying woke in 2020. That's
yeah. I mean, we've been woke around these.
I didn't know your woke game like that.
Yeah, I'm glad you're not for this gross amount of wealth in one person though. ... Right, Hasan, who hosted. Are you going to respond to a single point made in Ethan's video or just ramble about nothing? Hasan might be the goofiest cunt on this website. Why is this a lib thing? Are you unwell? Hasan is the most brain dead commentator on this platform. Crazy people get their political opinions from him. Comes back to check in. Fingers crossed you get permaban, man. Have a bad day. Oh shit, I'm back. Hey, I'm locked in. Rent free, baby. Yes, I want you to keep up the good work.
I mean, listen, he's already done 6 years. If 6 years from now he's still going, then like that guy who was like 14, he could now be in Doge.
Yeah. I do want to show you guys one thing that I think is very interesting as well. Because if you think that this like deflective conflation that the Israeli state uses to justify its cause as like purely defensive and the consistent ways in which they claim that they're defending themselves and they have security concerns, and anyone that actually has an issue with that is simply being anti-Semitic or whatever. There is a very similar example from Goebbels himself talking about how Germans have valid security concerns and that anyone that comes after the Nazi state for its actions are actually coming after every single German. Now, I want to show that.
I think I remember this thing. I think I can find it if you haven't found it.
Let me see. Yeah, I can't find it.
Because it was like it went viral recently. I think.
Yeah.
There's here, like more or less like this brief one.
Yeah, that is the one. Yeah, National Socialism today is Germany's guiding political idea and worldview. The entire German nation affirms it. To criticize National Socialism today, therefore, means to criticize the entire German people. This is damn near verbatim, one-to-one identical to people saying, oh, all Jews are Zionists. If you're criticizing Zionism, you're basically criticizing Judaism. And you're criticizing all Jews.
And like also, it's not just like the ism of it, because like it's like Zionism as it's practiced, which is that.
Yeah,
it's not.
You can't
it's not
do
the concept of a homeland for the Jews.
You can't do this. You can't do this and assume that everyone around you is gonna not see this as a direct. There is no separation that you want.
This is a standard that applies everywhere. This is like you see the same thing when like Azerbaijan like rolls into formerly Armenian territories and puts up their own cultural objects and displays them ostentatiously. Like it's a thing that takes place.
You're being quite Islamophobic for criticizing that. Okay, Azerbaijan is you're being anti-Turk. You're being Islamophobic.
I can hold space for that.
Yeah. Excuse me. It's really messed up.
I think we can perhaps give it some space, but I do think that there is like because when it does fucking come down to it, right? Like it is about like there's just like a quality with this stuff where what people want in like the arguments about this is an exception. They know what these images suggest. Yeah. They know the historical meaning of them, like the import that when you see this kind of shit, that it suggests like ethnic cleansing is going on, mass murder is going on. But like, no, what they want is an exemption that says actually in this context, maybe it makes sense. Yeah, it gets more purchase and legs than like, which is the same defense who does like anybody who does this shit makes. It just gets further along than others are allowed to.
Israel has turned like thousands of years of Jewish history like and religious iconography into different versions of the swastika, and then they complain and say, how dare you, like how dare you say these things, how dare you get mad at us, you must be anti-Semitic for behaving this way. It's like, no dude, they're anti-you, they're anti-death and destruction. And if you consistently present if you consistently present your actions as though you are doing it for Judaism, if you falsely conflate Judaism with the violent, aggressive actions of Israel, then yes, of course people are going to inevitably go, yeah, I guess this is shorthand.
I will say that like the biggest thing in this regard that like kind of like did damage that I still think about a lot and is the like the women's lingerie stuff, where like essentially, right, like there's this both like an age-old stereotype of like, you know, like Jews in Europe, like, you know, like like the anti-Semitic old like Christian stereotype of Jews is like these like sexual predators in their communities. It's one of the bases of the blood libel. And just sort of seeing that like seeing a bunch of people like en masse like do everything they can to legitimate it in an unprecedented way, not because they're the only people who ever perved out in a war zone like that before, but because like they were empowered to document it on social media, you know, brandish it for the whole fucking world.
The front facing like shameless nature of that is so strange. Like
and it's like if you again like
this,
it's
you know,
like all part of like the same. Like again, and
you can't do this and then go, how dare you put the Star of David on a Zionism poster? That is the most anti-Semitic thing I've ever seen. It's ridiculous. I don't know. It's just like saying fuck Saudi Arabia for doing a genocide in Yemen is not Islamophobic. Just like saying fuck Israel is not anti-Semitic.
Yeah, but they got the Kaaba. Did you consider that?
Yeah, that's it's so stupid. It's just so.
I don't know, man.
Like I feel like sometimes in order to understand where my interlocutors, my naysayers, the people who smear me as an anti-Semite are coming from, I have to like shut off my brain to not recognize any of this shit, you know? Yeah, KSA is the biggest culprit of this too, with stinky ass Wahhabism and the way that they make the way that they claim Houthis are kuffar. Yeah, I mean they just got all the smoke for the Shias, yes.
I mean, this is like, and America has a hand in that though. Seymour Hersh in like the 2000s, he wrote this awesome article for New Yorker. I forget the headline. It might be something like The Redirect, but the thesis of the article was that like you could look at America's policy in the Middle East and America's policy in the Muslim world, and you could broadly say that America was trying to engineer a geopolitical realignment that favored Sunni Islamic countries over Shia Islamic countries. Yeah. And there is like, you know, it's obviously it's a pretty simplified version of it, but when you use that kind of frame, what it does allow you to see is like, yeah, like the ways in which like American policy ends up encouraging these like really aggressively essentialist ideas of like Islam or Judaism and the people who practice them and like who they have to be treated as like authentic representations of it.
Yeah. Let me see where.
What are you looking for, the girl?
I'm just looking for the OG quote, like where the full.
Hold on, just type the quote in.
I am doing that.
Put it in quotes.
This is not. Yeah. Oh yeah. This is Goebbels on the United States.
Oh wow, that's a little on the nose.
Yeah. Here, look. Here's Joseph. Here's Joe.
Also, I want to say
Joe
this. I want to say this for Hasan's behalf before we read. We're reading this because we think it's bad. Okay.
I mean, yeah.
We're not fans of Joseph Goebbels. And we think it's bad.
Yeah.
All right, continue.
Here. The American press has the noble right to complain about Europe. It makes vigorous use of this right, particularly when Germany is involved. National Socialist Germany is a thorn in its eye. The Third Reich has always been the target of its mockery, hatred, lies, and slander since the 30th of January 1933, especially from that part controlled by the Jews. The American press takes particular pleasure in criticizing Germany on the grounds of humanitarianism, civilization, human rights, and culture.
True.
It has every right to do so. Its humanity is shown in most vivid form by lynchings. Which is, again, also kind of funny because, you know, they obviously tracked closely Jim Crow laws and whatnot because they were like, this is awesome. We should do that.
Precisely. I mean, it's also like you can see like, isn't it interesting how like disingenuous argumentation is like the eternal like argument, like arguing style of right wingers of all time.
Yeah, meth head debate perverts, a consistent through line throughout history that I just hate. Its civilization is shown in economic and political scandals that stink to high heaven. Its human rights are displayed by 11 or 12 million unemployed who apparently chose to be so. And its culture exists only because it's always borrowing from older European nations, such as a nation of whatever. He's like dunking on America. And then he goes, the American press replies to our complaints by saying that it has nothing against Germany, only against National Socialism. That is a poor excuse. National Socialism today is Germany's guiding political idea and worldview. The entire German nation affirms it. To criticize National Socialism today, therefore, means to criticize the entire German people.
Well, but here the thing is that like within Israel, right? Like Zionism is, and as like a like it's a like the German phrase for it, or like how like they conceive of stuff like this, like a Staatsräson. Like it's a logic, it's an ideology of the state. They support it, they endorse, like it's a accepted like reason in society. But it's like what that speaks to, right, is like part of the problem with Zionism in the first place, because it ends up like creating this essential category, staking what was previously not, like, again, like what was like a population spread across, I mean, like dozens of countries throughout the world, but now essentially like in the post-Holocaust world has staked the like category of Jews to the activity of the state here. So it's like essentially realizing, like fully affirming that logic that Goebbels is laying out there.
No. Evan, who is Jewish, you are literally a Jew-hating Nazi. The real analogy here is, I don't hate the Jews. I don't hate Jews. I hate people who support genocide, which is the equivalent of saying, I don't hate Muslims. I hate people who support genocide. Do you see how supporting genocide is independent of religion? Yeah, this was the original post. I don't hate the Jews. I hate Zionists is the equivalent of saying, I don't hate Muslims. I hate the vast majority of Muslims.
I mean, look, it is like, it's a real issue that like Jewish liturgy, like Jewish scripture, and like there is like the end of the Passover Seder, right, concludes with like the line next year in Jerusalem. And so in the hands of people who like aren't willing to appreciate that, like perhaps like this, millennia old expression of religious culture or whatever is not literally a guidebook for how the world should look in 2025, like it's a problem. That there's not like, that it seems like also so many people over have given to these hyper simplistic interpretations of Jewish history and culture. It's nauseating.
Yeah, it is very frustrating once again. Like, and then you have shameless charlatans like this. Are you going to vacation at the new Gaza Strip once it's built? Like, you are, bro, Trump is straight embarrassing. America's done. Trump P very small. Like, the people's attitude towards this kind of like horrifying cruelty.
All the federal workers need to learn to code.
Yeah. People's attitude towards this like horrific kinds of cruelty is just like, you act as though Obama's a national treasure. You act as though this stuff will never impact you, okay? You make it so hard for me to advocate for your well-being. You know what I mean? It's insane. How are you any different than these how are you any different than these groypers? Liberal groyperism is real. I think it's crazy.
The liberal groyper is something Felix must have invented.
Yeah, he did.
he cooked that.
He does talk about the liberal groyper, and I think that's still his
he's a scholar of groypers, period.
Yeah. Well, he is a groyper.
As a groyper himself.
Yeah. Anyway, same type of burger brains who don't care about war outside the borders of the USA. Yeah, it's just like, they also don't understand, like, war overseas is directly coming from your coffers, money that could be spent on building roads. Okay, that's why I brought the Eisenhower "Give Peace a Chance" speech or whatever. I've talked about that before, and it's not like Eisenhower was a good dude,
Oh yeah, well he talks. It's like he leaves the White House. I mean, well that's like a case though of like, imagine a guy just like helped like murder an entire family in a house, and like as he's leaving the house and like wiping the blood off his hands, he's like, what we should really be concerned about violence in our society. Like, he's totally right, but it's sort of like his credibility is a little annihilated by the time he's talking about it. I mean, also I think like these types of people also just sort of like resent thinking about like the world as an interconnected entity, and that like there isn't really a world in which like America is apart from the world and vice versa. That it's like, our fates are somewhat interconnected here.
Our media does everything in its power to make it seem as though that's just happening over there, and that is by design. So you don't recognize that what's happening over there actually harm you, okay? That's it. But that is also part of the reason why Americans can fancy themselves as a peace-loving nation. That is the irony there, which gives a unique opportunity for a reasonable politician to come out and truly advocate for a different vision of American foreign policy, because the only person that presents themselves as a peaceful dove, even though they clearly aren't, cannot be someone like Donald Trump. And that is what has happened at least in 2016 and certainly this past election cycle. And I kept reminding people of this reality over and over again. as Kamala Harris was running around with Liz Cheney and simultaneously saying, we're going to have the most lethal military of all time. And liberals would come in here in my chat and be like, what do you think the military does, stupid? Of course it's supposed to be lethal. It's like, dude.
I mean, also it goes to like the idea that it's, like, I mean, one of the things to me that just sort of sticks out is that it's, to what you were saying earlier, it's like, yeah, like when we do invest in these things, by the way, because they're happening elsewhere in the world and we feel a need to influence them, that's money that we are just sucking and sucking and sucking away from things that like require massive investment in both like human and, financial terms. I mean, we have plenty of shortages of, has anybody had a lot of fun getting a doctor easily lately? Like it just, the whole thing is so obviously out of whack. I don't really know how somebody could like think about it on those kinds of practical terms and determine that like what we really need is to make sure that like Minutemen missiles are firing at the best capability for the next 50 years, as opposed to like having, like lead out of the water.
This is, I think, a more honest approach. What this guy is doing here is an infinitely more honest approach than the crybaby perceived victimhood that I hear from liberal Zionists. He just comes in here and goes, fuck Hezbollah, fuck the Houthis, the U.S. government will take out every leader, rolling on the floor, laughing emoji.
Side with your prophet.
Side with your prophet that married a 9-year-old fucking sickening terrorist supporter. Like, that's great, man. Yeah, he's just doing common sense. Here's an apolitical chatter doing common sense.
Yeah, this isn't apolitical. He's actually expressing his national truth. This is the song of his homeland.